I stood in my daughter's kitchen, holding a suitcase in one hand and a bank statement showing $2 million in the other. The look on her face when she saw that number. Pure shock doesn't even begin to describe it. "Mom, where did you get?" "The same place I've been getting money for the past 15 years to pay for your mortgage, your kids' college tuition, and every family emergency that's ever come up," I said calmly. "But don't worry, Sarah, you won't have to deal with this burden anymore." You see, 3 days earlier, my own daughter had called me just a burden, right to my face. She had no idea who she was talking to. None of them did. They thought I was just some helpless old woman living off Social Security, dependent on their charity. Boy, were they wrong. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Margaret, and at 72 years old, I thought I had everything figured out. I'd raised 3 children as a single mother after my husband died when I was 38. Sarah, my eldest, at 45, Michael at 42, and little Jenny at 39, though she hates when I call her little. For the past decade, I'd been living in a small apartment across town, collecting my modest Social Security check and spending most of my time with my grandchildren. At least, that's what my family believed. What they didn't know was that I'd been running a successful online consulting business for the past 15 years. You see, before I became a full-time mom, I had a master's degree in business administration and 20 years of corporate experience. When the kids were grown and I found myself alone, I decided to put those skills to work again. I started small, helping local businesses with their marketing strategies, offering financial consulting to small startups. But word spread, and soon I was working with clients across the country. I kept it quiet, partly out of habit, and partly because I enjoyed watching my family assume I needed their help. I lived modestly, drove an old car, and never mentioned my growing bank account. Instead, I watched my children struggle with their own financial challenges and quietly stepped in to help whenever they needed it. Sarah's mortgage, when she was facing foreclosure 5 years ago? That was me. Michael's daughter's college tuition? Me again. Jenny's husband's medical bills after his accident? You guessed it. I told them I had some savings from their father's life insurance, and they never questioned it. Why would they? In their minds, I was just their aging mother, gradually spending down what little nest egg I had left. But I was actually building something much bigger than they could imagine. The first sign that something was changing came last Christmas. I'd spent weeks preparing for our family gathering, as I always did. I bought presents for everyone, cooked for 3 days straight, and made sure my small apartment was perfect for hosting. Sarah arrived late, immediately started criticizing the temperature of the food, and spent most of dinner on her phone. When I gently asked if she could put it away so we could talk as a family, she sighed dramatically. "Mom, I have real responsibilities. My job doesn't stop just because it's Christmas." Michael barely looked up from his own phone, and when I asked about his promotion at work, he just shrugged. "It's fine, Mom. Can we not do the whole catch-up thing? We're all tired." But it was Jenny who really stung. When I mentioned that I'd been thinking about traveling a bit, maybe taking a cruise or visiting some friends, she actually laughed. "Mom, you can barely afford your rent. Maybe focus on realistic goals." I felt something crack inside my chest that day, but I pushed it down. They were stressed, I told myself. Everyone had their own problems. The second incident happened in March. Michael's daughter Emma was applying to graduate school, and the financial aid wasn't covering everything. I'd already paid for her undergraduate degree, but they didn't know that. They thought she'd gotten scholarships. I overheard Michael on the phone with Sarah, stressed about finding the money for Emma's program. "I don't know what to do," he was saying. "Mom's already done so much, and I can't ask her for more. She's probably spent most of Dad's insurance money helping us over the years." I should have been touched by his concern, but instead, I felt a growing frustration. Here they were, worried about my finances while making assumptions about my capabilities. So I did what I'd been doing for years. I quietly transferred the money to Michael's account with a note saying I'd found some old bonds of their father's that had matured. The relief in his voice, when he called to thank me, was genuine. But it was followed by something that chilled me. "You know, Mom, you really shouldn't be giving away money like this. What if you need it for a nursing home someday? We can't take care of you if you spend everything now." A nursing home. At 72, when I was healthier and more mentally sharp than I'd ever been. The third incident was the worst yet. Jenny's son had gotten into trouble at school. Nothing serious, just typical teenage rebellion. But the private school was threatening expulsion unless the family paid for additional counseling and made a substantial donation to the school's disciplinary fund. Jenny called me, crying and desperate. "Mom, I don't know what to do. Brad's been working overtime, but we barely make ends meet as it is. If Tyler gets expelled, it'll ruin his chances at getting into a good college." I listened to her sob for 20 minutes, offering comfort and support. Then I told her I'd see what I could do. The next day, I called the school directly and made a donation that not only covered Tyler's situation, but also funded a new conflict resolution program. I did it anonymously, of course, and told Jenny that I'd spoken to them, and they'd agreed to give Tyler another chance with just the counseling requirement. She was so grateful, but then she said something that made my blood boil. "You know, Mom, you're so good at talking to people. It's probably because you have so much time on your hands now that you're retired. I wish I had that luxury. Time on my hands. As if the 40 hours a week I spent building my business was just me sitting around with nothing to do. But the breaking point came just last month, and it wasn't even about money. I'd been having some minor health issues, nothing serious, just some routine tests my doctor wanted to run. I made the mistake of mentioning it during our weekly family dinner at Sarah's house. Immediately, the conversation shifted to what they called practical concerns. "Mom, we need to talk about your living situation," Sarah announced, like she was chairing a board meeting. "Your apartment isn't equipped for someone with health issues." "I don't have health issues," I protested. "It's just routine screenings." "At your age, Mom, we need to be realistic," Michael chimed in. "Maybe it's time to start looking at assisted living facilities." "Assisted living?" "I'm 72, not 92. I run 3 miles every morning. I manage all my own affairs. Mom," Jenny interrupted gently. "We know this is hard to accept, but you're not getting any younger, and with your financial situation." There it was again, my financial situation. "What about my financial situation?" I asked, genuinely curious to hear their assessment. Sarah exchanged a look with her siblings. One of those looks that excluded me entirely, as if I wasn't sitting right there. "We know you've been spending your savings to help us out," Sarah said carefully. "We appreciate it, but we can't let you make yourself destitute for our sake." "What if something happens to you?" Michael added. "What if you need expensive medical care? We can't afford to take care of you financially, Mom. We're all struggling as it is." I felt something cold and hard settling in my stomach. "So what are you suggesting?" "There are some really nice places that accept Medicaid," Jenny said brightly, as if she was offering me a vacation. "Once you've spent down your remaining assets, you'd qualify for assistance." "You want me to spend down my assets?" "Mom, face reality," Sarah said, and her tone was sharper now. "You're going to be dependent on us eventually. Wouldn't it be better to plan for that now, while you still have some control over the situation?" I looked around the table at my 3 children. The ones I'd sacrificed everything for, the ones I'd put through college, the ones I'd bailed out of every financial crisis for the past decade. They were planning my decline like it was a foregone conclusion. "I see," I said quietly. "We're not trying to be mean, Mom," Michael said, reaching over to pat my hand condescendingly. "We just want what's best for you." And what's best for me is to spend all my money and then become a burden on the state." "You won't be a burden on the state," Sarah corrected. "You'll be well." She trailed off, but Jenny finished the thought. "You'll be our burden, Mom. But that's what family is for, right? Our burden." I sat there for a moment, letting those words sink in. Then I smiled, actually smiled, and nodded. "You're absolutely right," I said. "Family is for taking care of each other." They looked relieved that I was being so reasonable. "I think I'll head home now," I continued, standing up and gathering my purse. "I have some thinking to do." As I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: absolute clarity. For too long, I'd been playing a role that wasn't serving anyone. I was enabling my children's assumptions about my helplessness while denying them the opportunity to see who I really was. It was time for that to change. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I printed out my financial statements. All of them. My primary business account, $847,000. My emergency fund, $423,000. My investment portfolio, $891,000. My retirement accounts, $267,000. Total liquid assets, $2,428,000. Not including my real estate investments or the equity in the small office building I'd purchased 2 years earlier. I stared at those numbers for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and started making calls. First, I called my lawyer and updated my will. The college funds I'd established for all my grandchildren would remain. They were innocent in all this, but everything else, that was getting redistributed. Next, I called my accountant and had him prepare a complete financial summary. I wanted everything documented clearly. Then I called a realtor about listing my apartment. It was time for a change of scenery. Finally, I sat down and wrote 3 letters, one for each of my children. That afternoon, I invited them all to Sarah's house for what I told them was an important family meeting about my future care. They gathered in the living room, wearing expressions of patient concern mixed with barely concealed resignation. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," I began. "And you're right, it's time to face reality." Sarah nodded approvingly. "I'm glad you're being sensible about this, Mom." "Oh, I'm being very sensible," I agreed. "In fact, I've made some decisions that I think will solve everyone's problems." I reached into my purse and pulled out the financial statements, setting them on the coffee table. "First, I want to clear up some misconceptions about my financial situation." Michael leaned forward and picked up the top sheet. His eyes widened as he scanned the numbers. "Mom, what is this?" "Those are my current account balances," I said calmly. "As you can see, I'm not quite as destitute as you assumed." Jenny snatched the papers from Michael's hands, her mouth falling open. $2.4 million. "Mom, where did this come from?" "My business," I said simply. "The consulting firm I've been running for the past 15 years. "Business?" Sarah's voice was sharp. "What business? You're retired." "I was never retired, Sarah. I've been working 40 to 50 hours a week building a company that now has clients in 12 states. I've been quite successful, actually." The silence in the room was deafening. "You've been lying to us," Michael said finally. "I've been protecting myself," I corrected. "And it turns out that was wise, given yesterday's conversation about what a burden I'm going to become." "Mom, we didn't mean," Jenny started. "You meant exactly what you said," I interrupted. "You see me as a future burden who needs to spend down her assets so she can qualify for government assistance. You want to plan my decline and manage my dependence." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at Sarah's backyard, where my grandchildren had played so many times. The truth is, I've been enabling this perception for years. Every time one of you had a financial crisis, I stepped in to help. Sarah, when you were facing foreclosure, I paid off your remaining mortgage balance. That wasn't insurance money. That was my money, earned from my work. Sarah's face went white. Michael, Emma's college tuition? All 4 years, plus her living expenses? That was me. The scholarships she thought she'd received were actually payments I made directly to the school. Michael made a choking sound. And Jenny, Tyler's private school, Brad's medical bills, even the down payment on your house that you thought came from that lucky lottery ticket you supposedly won, all me. Jenny started crying. I gave you money because I loved you, and I could afford it. But I let you believe I was sacrificing my own security to do it. I thought I was being generous, but I realize now I was being dishonest. And worse, I was being condescending. I turned back to face them. You want to know what I've decided? I'm moving to Florida. I've already put my apartment on the market and made an offer on a beautiful condo in Sarasota. I'm going to expand my business, maybe do some traveling, perhaps take up painting again. But Mom, Sarah stammered, what about us? What about when you need help? I'll hire help, I said simply. Professional help. People who will be paid fairly for their services instead of family members who see me as a burden. I picked up my purse and walked toward the door. Wait, Michael called out. We're sorry, we didn't know. I paused at the threshold. You didn't know because you never asked. In 15 years of running my own business, not one of you ever asked me about my day, my work, or my goals. You saw what you expected to see. A helpless old woman living on Social Security. We can change, Jenny pleaded. We want to really know you. I hope so, I said. But that's going to have to happen on equal terms. I'm not your charity case, and I'm not your future burden. I'm a successful businesswoman who happens to be your mother. I opened the door and stepped outside. I'll be in touch once I'm settled in Florida. Maybe we can start over, as adults this time. That was 6 months ago. I'm writing this from my beautiful condo in Sarasota, looking out at the Gulf of Mexico. My business is thriving. I've actually expanded into online courses and have more clients than I can handle. I've heard from my children, of course. There were angry phone calls at first, accusations of manipulation and deception. Then came the bargaining phase, promises to do better, invitations to family gatherings, attempts to guilt me into returning. But something interesting has happened over these past months. Slowly, carefully, we've started to rebuild our relationships on new ground. Sarah was the first to reach out genuinely. She called not to ask for anything, but to tell me about a promotion she'd received at work. We talked for an hour about her career goals and her challenges as a working mother. It was the first real conversation we'd had in years. Michael surprised me by asking for business advice. His company was considering a major expansion, and he wondered if I'd be willing to consult on their financial planning. We worked together for 3 weeks, and he told me afterward that he'd never realized how sharp and insightful I was. Jenny has been the slowest to adjust, but she's trying. She sends me pictures of Tyler's activities and actually asks about my day, my work, my life here in Florida. My grandchildren have been wonderful. They love visiting Grandma's beach house, and they're fascinated by my work. Emma, Michael's daughter, is considering business school now, inspired by what she calls my secret entrepreneurial empire. The money I'd given them over the years, I never asked for it back. Those were gifts, freely given out of love. But I also never gave another penny. And it's been interesting to watch how they've learned to handle their own financial challenges. They're more resourceful than they knew. Here's what I learned from this whole experience. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for your family is to stop enabling their misconceptions about you. I spent years being someone I wasn't, allowing my children to see me as less capable than I was, and it helped no one. They needed to see me as a whole person, not just their mother, but a woman with talents, ambitions, and resources of my own. And I needed to stop hiding behind the comfortable fiction of helplessness. Am I still their mother? Absolutely. Do I still love them unconditionally? Of course. But I'm also Margaret the businesswoman, Margaret the Florida resident, Margaret the woman who runs 3 miles every morning and is learning to paint watercolors. The best part? They love this version of me even more than the old one. Turns out, having a capable, independent, successful mother is actually something to be proud of. Who knew? If you're in a similar situation, whether you're hiding your capabilities to avoid expectations, or whether you're making assumptions about the people you love, I encourage you to take a step back. The truth, even when it's uncomfortable, is always better than a comfortable lie. And remember, you're never too old to surprise people, including yourself. Hit like and subscribe this channel for more hair-touching stories.